Welcome back now. We want to turn to the opioid crisis in America. The epidemic claiming 130 lives a day, according to the Centers for Disease Control. Narcan is a nasal spray created to help reverse a suspected overdose. It's become more available in vending machines. And my next guest is the leading inventor of that product, Narcan. Joining us now is the CEO of Opioid Pharmaceuticals, Dr. Roger Crystal. And Dr. Crystal, it's good to have you on the program this morning.
Thank you.
Yeah, we were just talking about fentanyl. That's the key substance in an opioid, right? It is an opioid, but it's 50 times stronger than heroin.
Absolutely. So fentanyl is an opioid. It's, as you say, 50 times stronger than heroin, and it's now contained in over 55% of opioid overdoses that result in death. We had, as you say, 130 every day, about almost 50,000 in 2017.
I want you to assess where we are right now in the opioid crisis. Jack, you've been on this program a number of times, and you've made the point that in the NFL, when you're hurt, when you're down, they give you an opioid. The doctors are prescribing opioids, and you said, why not just prescribe marijuana, cannabis? Tell us what you believe.
I mean, just from my personal experiences, you know, I know cannabis cannot obviously solve all the issues that you would treat with opioids, but I think there are some pain-related issues that can be controlled with cannabis. I know personally that I've experienced that. I have hundreds of friends who have, you know, really deep chronic injuries and things that they deal with that they don't use opioids for. And so you have that, and I think when you start using those opioids from a young age, like some of us are prescribed, you kind of get into a habit and you get used to that feeling and that sensation, and that's something that's really hard to kick from what I've seen. And so you combine that, and then also you look at the culture of the recreational use of opioids now. I mean, if you go on and turn on a hip-hop song, you're going to hear people talk about popping Molly and Percocet and all those recreational uses of opioids. Yes. And so those are also a big issue as well.
Absolutely. I mean, the crisis at the moment has got to where we are because of a big contributing factor being the widespread overprescribing of all of these opioid painkillers. And where we are now, as it's evolved from people taking these to heroin and now fentanyl. So absolutely it started with a lot of this prescribing. I'm a surgeon from the UK originally and barely prescribed any of these opioids there at all.
But that being said, are the prescription rates now falling given the government crackdown at the local level and at the federal level? I mean, that's a concern for people who legitimately need OxyContin to treat bone pain related to cancer.
Absolutely.
But are the prescription rates falling at this point, and now the addiction problem is not really falling on the shoulders of the doctors? That's my question.
I mean, we're certainly encouraged by some of the guidelines put in place where more appropriate prescribing of opioids appears to be taking place. In terms of how that's translating into numbers of prescriptions, I don't yet know. Certainly within the last few years, certainly still about 30 million people in the US received an opioid prescription. And we're still left, unfortunately, with minimum 2 million, other estimates up to 6 million people who have an opioid addiction. So unfortunately for these people, they have this addiction, they have this chronic brain disease that needs treating. And now we're in a fentanyl crisis. The issue becomes the widespread availability of this compound.
That's coming in from China. Most of the fentanyl comes in from China?
A lot's coming from China. Some, I mean, for example, just 2 months ago, there was a seizure at the border of Mexico, however, where they seized 50 kilograms of fentanyl, enough to kill 57 million people. So what we're working on as a company is an opioid overdose reversal agent called nalmefene that we think can be better suited for a fentanyl overdose. And we've actually got some funding from BARDA as well, the biological division of HHS, really focused on countermeasures for chemical attacks, because their concern is, might we experience a chemical warfare attack?
By the way, as part of this China trade deal, the president did get the Chinese to agree to start singling out fentanyl and saying what it's for. Now, the Chinese pushed back and said, well, wait a second, we can't bar all fentanyl because fentanyl is used in chemicals like weed killer and other things like that. I mean, what do you think about how has China's response been?
I mean, the response is encouraging to see that they are providing a response. I think we'll see how that plays out. And for me, as a physician and someone who's trying to develop countermeasures against this opioid crisis, we will see how that plays out in numbers.
Go ahead, James.
Yeah, so that staggering numbers, 130 a day, people dying. They often, even if Narcan was there and able to be administered, it couldn't save them because sometimes the drugs are too powerful? Is that what the next research is about?
Indeed, we're observing that increasingly more amounts of naloxone, not necessarily Narcan nasal spray, but naloxone in general, is required to resuscitate someone from an initial overdose. With fentanyl, you talk about the window of intervention being shorter than perhaps in the past with heroin. And then the other risk is once the naloxone wears off, you still have high levels of fentanyl in the blood, and we hear about people falling back into an overdose. So we believe our follow-on product potentially has properties that can address this. Absolutely.
We will leave it there. Dr. Roger Crystal, it's great to have you on the program.
Thank you for having me here.
Please come back soon. Give us an update on this important topic.